hospital because of the clinical work. I think this is second best alternative to see you on the screen on Sundays between 9 to 9:45. Now we want to progress in this field, and I would suggest or say that I want all my trainees and fellows to be one of the best. So you have to progress yourself. So I will be an aid for that. We will be, all our consultants will be an aid towards that end. And with that, I would like to discuss the subject of physics involved in echocardiography, especially with in terms of Doppler echocardiography. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So when you talk about Doppler, we have to mention two names: Christian Doppler, who was an Austrian born in 1803, who was actually working with the astronomy, and he discovered that discovered the effect of change in frequency when the object is moving, when there is a stationary transducer, and hence this effect is called as Doppler effect, which is used in Doppler echocardiography with advantage to the patient's benefit. The second name is Bernoulli, who is from Switzerland in the place called Basel. He is a mathematician and he was involved in fluid mechanics, and he discovered that the pressure gradient across the constriction is equal to twice the velocity square. And when you talk about Doppler effect, we have to know about the Doppler shift. That is when you have a moving object which is trying to come closer to the transducer or the mechanism of sensing that object coming near to it. As the object reaches the transducer, the frequency increases, and if the object is moving away from the transducer, suppose it's on the right side of the screen, this frequency will decrease. So this apparent change in the frequency as compared to the transmitted frequency is the one which is coming from the object. So the difference in the frequency is called the Doppler shift. By knowing the Doppler shift, we can know the direction and magnitude of blood flow, or for that matter, the magnitude and direction of the object which is moving away from the transducer. This is evident when you stand on the railway station platform. As the engine is approaching the platform, you feel that the siren of the engine becomes shriller, but as it is passing away, it becomes less shrill. So this is a practical experience. Even in ambulance, when the ambulance is coming towards you, you feel that the siren is very high in its pitch, but when it's moving away, the pitch decreases. This is the Doppler shift. And a couple of things we need to know about the Doppler shift is that it this equation, which is the change in the frequency called Doppler shift, is dependent upon the reflected the transmitted frequency and the reflected frequency. What is the frequency of transmission, and the what is the frequency of the reflected frequency which is received by the transducer, and the angle of interception. This angle is called as angle of interception. So it is clear that for us to determine the flow of blood, the beam of the echocardiographic waves, that is echo waves, ultrasound waves, must be absolutely parallel to the flow of blood. So if you have a parallel flow of blood, the cosine theta, which is represented here, is equal to 1. And when cosine theta is 1, there is accurate representation of the determination of velocity of blood. But if the cosine theta is 0, which means that the echo beam is perpendicular to the flow of blood, the cosine theta is 0, and here there is absolute, the echo beam will not be able to determine the speed and velocity of blood. And if you increase or decrease this angle up to 20%, 20 degrees, it is acceptable. If this angle is up to 20%, it is reasonable. But beyond 20%, the values of velocity will be very much erroneous. It cannot be taken into clinical use when you are dealing with patients. This is especially important when you are looking at the gradients across the valves when they are stenosed. The other factor which determines the accuracy is the actual velocity of the fluid. We are talking about blood here. The velocity of fluid also influences. If the velocity is higher, the gradient may be less than what if the velocity is lower. And also it depends upon the frequency of the transducer which is used. This is the frequency of the transducer. The lower the frequency, better is the Doppler shift measure, and hence the velocity of blood flow. So these factors are exactly opposite to that of two-dimensional echocardiography. This is called as paradoxes of Doppler. The first paradox is that Doppler works best when there is parallel echo beam orientation or alignment as compared to the flow of blood. This is the first paradox. The Doppler measurements are accurate when the echo beam is parallel to the flow of blood. This is in contrast with the two-dimensional echocardiography, where the resolution is the best when the echo beam is perpendicular to the tissue or the blood which we are interrogating. Usually the tissue, when we are talking about two-dimensional echocardiography, we are dealing with morphology or anatomical features. Whereas when you're dealing with Doppler effect, we are dealing with physiology. So this is the basic difference between 2D echocardiography and Doppler echocardiography. I will again repeat. In Doppler, for us to get the exact value of velocity and the speed of that is velocity and the direction of blood flow, the beam has to be parallel to the flow of blood. Whereas in two-dimensional echocardiography, it is perpendicular. When you want to get the best quality image, it should be perpendicular. So this is the first paradox. The second paradox is that the frequency. For us to get the best image, we need high frequency transducer. That is applicable for two-dimensional echocardiography. But for us to get the best Doppler velocity profiling, we need a low frequency transducer. That's what is being shown here. So when you're talking about Doppler, there are at least 4 different types of Doppler which are useful in the clinical settings. One is the pulse wave Doppler. Second is the continuous wave Doppler. Third is color flow Doppler. Fourth is the tissue Doppler. So there are 4 different types of Doppler which can be used in the clinical setting. And we need to know what are the mechanisms involved and what are the advantages and in which situation you would like to use which Doppler. So coming to the blood flow velocity, this shows the simplified depiction of blood flow velocity in a large blood vessel such as aorta, with each systole as the blood is passing through the tubular structure, that is the aorta in our case. During systole you get what is called as the plug flow, where all the red blood cells are running parallel to each other and there is absolutely no turbulence. Only thing is that the blood is a non-Newtonian fluid, so it does not follow the same principles as water, which is a Newtonian fluid. So blood is a non-Newtonian fluid in the sense that there are several elements in the blood. The red blood, the blood corpuscles, the white blood cells, platelets, RBCs, and plasma proteins and other substances which are contained in the blood. So it makes that fluid into non-Newtonian fluid. It does not obey the Newton's laws. So because of that, the velocity of the blood in the center of the vessel is higher than that in the peripheries. If you look at the peripheries, the blood flow, the speed of RBCs going in the blood will be less compared to the center. So you get a blood flow to start with, but as you move away from the aorta for a given cardiac cycle, the blood flow becomes parabolic at a particular distance from the aortic valve. So this is actually, by the time it reaches here, it becomes diastole, and you get you really get multiple broad range flow velocities. That is, as I said, the center will have RBCs traveling faster than the RBCs which are at the periphery. If you look at the pulse wave spectral Doppler, if it is a venous flow, which is very low velocity flow, you get a broad Doppler spectrum. But as the flow increases, for example, in case of aorta, because of the plug flow, you get a narrow Doppler spectrum. Here the spectrum is broad, whereas this here it is narrow. And if there is some slight turbulence because of an atheromatous plaque here, there is slightly skewed parabolic flow. And if there is valvular stenosis, actually the potential energy is converted into kinetic energy, in which case the velocity will be increased tremendously across the stenotic valve. Velocity will be increased, and this will give you a high velocity spectral broad spectral profile as is shown. So when you're talking about spectral Doppler, it means that you have the velocity on the vertical axis. When you're talking about spectral Doppler, it is velocity against time. Time is on the horizontal axis and the velocity is on the vertical axis. That is what is called as spectral Doppler. Coming to the use of this in the clinical settings, for example, this is a apical 4-chamber view using transthoracic echocardiography. This picture is transthoracic echocardiography. You have put the probe at the apex, which is at the 5th intercostal space in the mid, just a little away from the mid-clavicular line. So they are all close to the mid-clavicular line. At the apex, you have put the probe, and you're trying to look at the velocity profile across the mitral valve. Because the blood flow is coming from the left atrium into the left ventricle, in transthoracic echocardiography using this apical 4-chamber view, blood is coming from left atrium to the left ventricle during diastole. It is coming towards the transducer because the transducer is here. The velocity profile will be positive, and because the during the isovolumetric relaxation phase during early part of diastole, that is in diastole, you have 4 different phases. The early part of the diastole is the isovolumetric relaxation phase, where both the aortic valves and the mitral valve is closed and the left ventricle is relaxing, and there is no volume change. That's why it's called as isovolumetric relaxation phase. During this, as the pressure in the left ventricle is falling, there will be no flow of blood because the mitral valve is closed. But once the left atrial pressure exceeds the left ventricular pressure, the left ventricular pressure is falling, and once it falls below the left atrial pressure, the mitral valve opens and you get the rapid filling phase when the blood enters the left ventricle, and up to 80% of the left ventricle filling occurs during this time, and this produces a huge A wave. And just after that, there is equalization of pressure in the left atrium and the left ventricle, and hence the velocity profile will show no flow. This is called as the diastasis phase of the diastole. There is nothing is happening during this time. This is a fraction of a time. And towards the end of the diastole, the atrium contracts and contributes to about 20 remaining 20% of the left ventricular filling. So 80% is contributed by the passive filling of the left ventricle during the early diastole, which is called as A wave. But towards the end of diastole, the left atrium contracts and contributes to about 20% of the left ventricular filling, producing the A wave. So we have four components in the diastole: the isovolumetric relaxation period, rapid filling period, diastasis, and late filling. And all this can be measured using the pulse wave Doppler. Because this velocity is low, we need to use pulse wave Doppler, especially when you're looking at the diastolic function of the left ventricle. But if you are looking at in mitral stenosis, if you want to determine the gradient, because the velocity will be increased, because the blood has to pass through a narrow orifice. Mitral stenosis, the orifice is reduced. Normal value is 4 to 6 square centimeters. So if it becomes less than 2.5, and especially if it is 1 centimeter or less, where there is severe mitral stenosis, the velocity will be increased and you need to use continuous wave Doppler. So the pulse wave Doppler is useful to determine the velocity and the direction of blood flow when the velocities are low, that is less than 2 meters per second. But when the velocity is high, especially in stenotic lesions, you have to use continuous wave Doppler because of the fact that if you use pulse wave Doppler, there will be aliasing and there will be misrepresentation of the flow. That I'll come to it in the next few slides. So just to remember, when the velocities are low, you should use pulse wave Doppler. When the velocities are high, you should use continuous wave Doppler. When the velocity is low, you have to use pulse wave Doppler. Velocity is high, you have to use continuous Doppler. And this is also useful when pulse wave Doppler is also useful when you want to look at the flow across the atrial septal defects, because the velocity of flow will be low. For example, you have a atrial septal defect, left atrium to right atrium. This is left to right shunt, and because of the similar pressures in both chambers, actually left atrial pressure is a little high. Suppose we will say that 6 to 12 millimeters left atrial pressure, right atrial pressure is about 2 to 4 millimeters less. It will be 4 to 8 millimeters. So this is low velocity flow, and for this you have to use pulse wave Doppler and actually reduce the color gain to be able to look at the left to right shunting across the atrial septal defect. On the right hand side, this was the mitral valve. We are looking at the aortic valve here, and here we are using the 5-chamber apical view in transthoracic echocardiography. This is a transthoracic echocardiography. You are looking at the aortic blood flow using pulse wave Doppler, and because the aortic blood flow is occurring away from the transducer, here it was occurring towards the transducer, getting a positive wave. Here we are looking at the blood flow away from the transducer, so this will become negative, and during systole, this is the representative ECG. Please note that this systole starts from the top of the R wave and extends up to the end of the T wave. This is the systole, and in this you have the early systolic flow followed by early to mid systolic flow, and then you have the mid to late systolic flow when the flow is actually coming down, and then there is slight reversal of flow at the end, because before the aortic valve actually closes, little bit of blood is coming back because of the peripheral vascular resistance, and by that time the aortic valve will close, and then the diastole will start. This systole. So this is the pulse wave Doppler across in the aortic aorta. So coming to the this we already said the Doppler principle and Doppler frequency shift. Doppler echocardiogram based on the principle that there is a change in frequency of the received echoes. This is the received echoes and this is the transmitted echoes. If the blood flow is occurring away from the transducer, if this is the transducer which is emitting the echo beams, as the blood is moving away from the probe, the received frequency will be much less. This is as compared to if you are measuring the blood here where the blood is traveling towards the transducer. This is the emitted frequency and this is the received frequency. Because the blood is coming towards the transducer, you get increased frequency. So this is the frequency shift which can give us an idea of the, as I said, direction and velocity of blood flow. So this is called as the Doppler shift, and here you can see that echoes reflected from blood moving up towards the transducer exhibit higher frequencies compared to the transmitted Doppler ultrasound pulses. Coming to continuous wave Doppler, now we'll go into the 4 different types. First one is the continuous wave Doppler. In the continuous wave Doppler, there are 2 transducers, two piezoelectric crystals. One is continuously emitting the ultrasound waves, one is continuously receiving the ultrasound waves. In continuous wave Doppler, there are 2 different piezoelectric crystals. When you activate the continuous wave Doppler button on the machine, you will be activating 2 crystals, one which is emitting the rays, the other one is receiving the ultrasound waves. And here the Bernoulli equation is demonstrated. This is based on the principle that the energy is conserved. That is the conservation. It depends upon the principle of conservation of energy. The blood flow velocity is increasing. This is the stenotic valve. The blood flow velocity increases across the stenotic valve as it is the blood is flowing across the aortic valve. The potential energy contained in the blood will be converted into kinetic energy, and as a result of which there is a drop in the blood, loss of pressure here, and that's the difference between the if we know the to calculate the pressure difference between this there is a pressure drop which occurs across the flow through the narrowed orifice. For us to determine the pressure gradient, which is normally done in echocardiography, we use the simplified which states that pressure 4 times V square. If you know the velocity across the valve, and if you multiply by 4 and square it, you will get the pressure difference. This is the actual Bernoulli equation which has been modified, but in clinical practice this equation is sufficient for us. Here it's also necessary for us to know that, especially when we talk about aortic valve, as the blood passes through this narrowed orifice, we said there will be negative pressure generated here and the pressure becomes recovered somewhere across the aorta. That is called pressure recovery phenomenon. So this also explains sometimes why the pressure gradients developed measured by echocardiography are much higher than what is determined by the echocardiographic, in the catheterization lab. So the pressure gradient which is measured by echocardiography is much higher than what is measured in the catheterization law, especially if you are measuring the peak pressure. This is because of two reasons. One reason is that in echocardiography, we are measuring the instantaneous pressure gradient in a given cardiac cycle. Whereas in catheterization lab, we are measuring the peak to peak gradient, that is the LV pressure measured in one cardiac cycle, and then the aortic root pressure measured in its next cardiac cycle. So we are putting a catheter into the LV, measuring the LV systolic pressure, and then you are pulling it into the aortic root, and then measuring the aortic root pressure, aortic peak pressure. So because we are measuring the peak to peak pressure, this will be lower than the instantaneous pressure which is measured by the echocardiography. This is one reason why the pressure gradient by echocardiography is higher. The second reason is that phenomenon called pressure recovery. So the ultrasound beam, continuous wave Doppler beam, when we put it across the aortic valve in stenotic lesions, it gives us the maximum pressure gradient, and because of the loss of pressure in the process of conversion of potential energy into kinetic energy, we are measuring the pressure gradient here. So because of the loss of pressure here, the pressure gradient will also be read higher than what it is actually, because of the pressure recovery phenomenon. This is especially true in aortic root which is narrow, which is less than 2 centimeters in diameter. This occurs. If the aortic root is wide, this is not a big problem. But as I said, the initial first reason for increased pressure gradient during echocardiography will still be present there. This is about continuous wave Doppler. This continuous wave Doppler is able to measure frequencies as much as 7 meters per second. It can measure high frequencies, but there is range ambiguity. The thing with continuous Doppler is that it cannot tell us where is the exact point of increased velocity. That is the biggest problem with continuous Doppler. So in aortic stenosis, we know that the highest velocity is in the aortic valve. So whatever pressure gradient is measured by the continuous wave Doppler is same as what is the pressure gradient in the aortic valve. The other the advantage of continuous wave Doppler is that it is able to measure high velocities, whereas that pulse wave Doppler we cannot measure high velocities. So the two major differences are that in pulse wave Doppler we can place the sample volume at a place where you want to measure the velocity and determine the velocity. Second thing is that in pulse wave Doppler there is no range ambiguity, in the sense that you are measuring where it is occurring, but it cannot measure velocities greater than 2 meters per second. This is in contrast with continuous wave Doppler, where you can measure high velocities, but there is range ambiguity in the sense that you will not know where exactly the position of increased velocity is occurring. So if you look at the velocity profile, spectral velocity profile in a pulse wave Doppler, the inside of the wave will be empty, whereas in continuous wave Doppler it will be full. So this is another difference which we can make out when we are looking at the velocity profile. For example, this is a pulse wave velocity profile. So the inside will be empty, whereas in continuous wave Doppler it will be full. The pulse wave Doppler instrumentation is showed here, but what we are interested is what is called as the pulse repetition frequency, which is the number of pulses per second. So this is the transducer and this is the object we are trying to interrogate. So in this pulse wave Doppler echocardiography, pulsed Doppler echocardiography or pulse wave echocardiography, there is a single transducer which is emitting the waves, which emits the pulse and then waits for the pulse to return and then only sends the other impulse. So this number of pulses per second is called as the pulse repetition frequency, and the duration of each pulse is called as the pulse duration, and the interval between two pulses is called the pulse repetition period. So there are three words here. One is the pulse repetition period, which is the amount of time between one pulse to the second pulse. Second is the pulse duration, which is the time taken for each of the pulse, and the pulse repetition frequency is the number of pulses per second. And here we need to know what is the Nyquist limit. Nyquist limit is the velocity beyond which what is called as aliasing will occur. This is if you see the old movies or even the fan which is rotating on the roof at lower speeds, when the speed is increasing, sometimes you will see that the fan is initially moving in one direction, but with increased speed, you apparently falsely perceive that the fan is moving in the opposite direction. Similarly, the car wheels, when they're rotating in one direction, as the speed increases, you might perceive, especially in the old movies, if you see the cars going, you will see that there is the wheels are moving in the opposite. This is called as aliasing, and same thing happens here. And to avoid this, you have to see that the pulse repetition frequency sampling or the pulse repetition frequency has to be match the Nyquist limit. So here you are seeing that normal velocity flow, you are using pulse wave Doppler, and there is a faithful reconstruction of the Doppler wave. But as the frequency increases, as the velocity increases and the Nyquist limit is exceeded, the waveform which is going towards bottom of the screen here actually comes onto the top of the screen, and this leads to errors in interpretation of the velocity, and hence if the velocity is higher, we must go for continuous wave Doppler. This is again depiction of the Doppler frequency in the Doppler frequency in the mitral inflow Doppler velocity profile. I think we already discussed this. Velocity to pressure gradient conversion is done by using the simplified Bernoulli equation when you are looking at gradients across the stenotic valves. And here in pulse wave Doppler, you place this sample volume, that is the two small parallel beams which are placed at the location where you exactly want to determine the velocity. So this facility is not available in continuous wave Doppler. And coming to tissue Doppler velocities, here what is done is we look at low amplitude, high frequency Doppler signals are separated, they are removed in tissue Doppler, and you are looking at low velocity, high amplitude movement of tissues. Here we are looking at tissue, not the blood. So the tissue is moving at a low velocity but high amplitude, and here the machine, when you place the tissue Doppler button, it eliminates the high frequency Doppler signals and low amplitude signals, so goes where only tissue movement is determined. So in the systole you get the wave. If it is moving towards the transducer, it will be positive. Moving away from the transducer, it will be negative. And because we are looking at the apex in a transthoracic echocardiography, you are getting a S wave which is positive, and E prime and A prime. These are corresponding waves of mitral inflow Doppler when you are using pulse wave Doppler, looking at the mitral inflow velocities. Here we are looking at the tissue movement. We are looking at the movement of the tissues away from the transducer. When the ventricle is relaxing, it is moving away from the transducer, and you get similar waveforms which are seen in the mitral inflow velocity, that is E and V. But to differentiate between the E and A wave produced by the mitral inflow velocities, this is labeled as E prime and A prime. And these waves are important when we are looking at the diastolic function. And the important differentiating factor from the mitral inflow velocity and the tissue velocity during diastole is to quantify the diastolic dysfunction. In patients who have pseudo-normal diastolic dysfunction, E prime will be smaller than the A, whereas with tissue Doppler, with the pulse wave Doppler, the E will be E and A ratio will be normalized. That's why it's called pseudo-normal. In mitral wave inflow velocity, in patients who are pseudo-normal, E by A ratio will be normal. But if you look at the tissue Doppler, the E will be smaller than the A. That is a differentiating feature between the tissue Doppler and the mitral velocity Doppler profile in patients who have diastolic dysfunction. So here again, when the tissue is moving towards the transducer, you get a red color, whereas if it is moving away from the transducer, it becomes blue. That is the BART. Blue is away, red is towards. So the same thing applies for color flow echocardiography. 3 color flow options are available. When the blood is coming towards the transducer, it is red. If there's no blood flow, it will be black. For example, here there's no blood flow, it becomes black. But if it is moving away, it becomes blue. So this is a color Doppler processing by autocorrelation. By comparing the successive pulses of ultrasound, it is possible to determine the velocity along the sector of interest. And it is very important for us to recognize that there are instrumentation factors in color flow Doppler imaging. If we keep the color flow velocity frequencies optimal, only then we'll get the correct picture. But if the scale is altered, you may underestimate or overestimate a color flow signal. This is very important in terms that we are not measuring wrong color flow Doppler signals unless you use the appropriate settings of the color gain and frequency settings on the machine. So the same mitral regurgitation can be visualized, indicating varying degrees of severity if the frequency settings are not kept optimal. Normally we keep it between 50 to 60 centimeters per second. That is the color flow settings. And here some of the major differences between the color flow Doppler, pulse wave Doppler, and continuous wave Doppler are shown here. Quickly revising, this is a revision of what all we said in the recent 20-30 minutes. So the in the continuous wave Doppler, there is actually no sample volume. We do not place a sample volume. The velocity is measured all across the echo beam, whereas in pulse wave Doppler, we place a sample volume which is of 2 to 5 millimeters in thickness. We actually tell the machine where you want to measure the velocity. That is not possible in continuous wave Doppler, and in color flow Doppler we do not again adjust the sample volume, but we can adjust the sector scan sector. You can decrease or increase the sector size of the sector. Then the velocities measured will be higher in continuous wave Doppler as compared to the pulse wave Doppler. Both of them show the time velocity spectral graph, where you have the time in the horizontal axis and velocity on the vertical axis. And detection of high blood flow velocity is possible with continuous wave Doppler, but it's not possible with pulse wave Doppler because aliasing occurs. So there's no aliasing in continuous wave Doppler, and if you cross the Nyquist limit, velocities will be aliased and appear on the opposite side of the baseline. The depth resolution is not possible here in continuous wave Doppler, whereas in pulse wave Doppler, you know where the velocity is changing. So that velocity, the range that's called as range resolution is possible. So this in principle is about something about Doppler. So what we have done in the last 20-30 minutes is that we defined what is Doppler shift. Then we went into 4 different types of Doppler: pulse wave Doppler, continuous wave Doppler, and then the color flow Doppler and the tissue Doppler. What are the major differences? To sum up, in pulse wave, you can measure low velocities and you can place a sample volume, but if the velocity is higher, there will be, when you exceed the Nyquist limit, the wave will form or will occur on the other side of the baseline, which is leading to, which is called as aliasing, which is leading to inappropriate measurement of the velocities. That is, high velocities cannot be measured with pulse wave Doppler. Then continuous wave Doppler, there are 2 piezoelectric crystals, one sending the continuously sending the echo waves, second is receiving the echo waves. So you can determine high flow, high velocities across stenotic valves using continuous wave Doppler, but at the cost of losing the depth perception. Where is the velocity change occurring? It will not tell us exactly. Color flow is the modified pulse wave Doppler, where you're using the advantage of color signals. Blue is away, red is towards, and you will this can be used to quantify the regurgitant jet area, but it is subjected to technical problems. You have to use the frequency color Doppler frequency exactly between 50 to 60 centimeters per second. Otherwise, it will show the color jet bigger or smaller depending upon the settings you have kept on the machine. So this is also important. And the color flow Doppler, especially when you're talking about mitral regurgitation, is influenced by the technical factors as well as the hemodynamic factors. That is, if you're measuring the continuous wave, the color flow Doppler area, mapping the color flow area during anesthetic, the color flow signals will be much less as compared to the awake conditions. So it all we have to take into account all the factors which are responsible for a correct assessment of a given regurgitant jet area. And then we have the tissue Doppler, where you want to remove the high frequency component and then concentrate on the high amplitude component. And this is utilized when you put the sample volume on the tissue. For example, the mitral annulus or the tricuspid myocardial annulus. You can measure the tissue Doppler velocities. The waves are S wave during systole and E prime and A prime during diastole. The systolic component is useful to measure the systolic function of the myocardium. The values we have when you talk about left ventricle, we have the lateral septal myocardial velocity, lateral myocardial velocity, and the septal velocity. These values range from 8 to 10, 8 to 12 centimeters per second. The same thing can be applied for the right ventricle, and the S wave velocities indicate of systolic function, whereas the diastolic waves E prime and A prime will represent the diastolic function. And we have the ICA webinar on the 13th, 7 p.m. and then the FCA webinar on the 6 p.m. If there are any questions, please let me know. And thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
No, sir. No, sir.
Is it clear? Is it clear? Will you remember something?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
There are no questions? In which case, I'll ask you tomorrow the questions. I'll come to you and ask you. Just read it about. It's very interesting. And in the exams, 10 to 20% of the questions are based on physics. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
sir.
very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
We'll
sir.
meet next Sunday. Thank you. Bye.
Yes, sir.
On the Teams. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.